I'm Delane Carter, 58 years old, and I've been a widow for more than a decade. People often mistake my quiet nature for weakness, but that night at Christmas dinner, my own son reminded me just how invisible I could be to the people I love the most. We were sitting around the long oak table in my sister's house in Asheville. The air smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles, and laughter bounced from wall to wall. Everyone was relaxed, passing bowls of mashed potatoes, clinking glasses of red wine, trading stories that had been told 100 times before. I watched Alvin, my only child, as he leaned back in his chair, his wife Lacey by his side. They looked proud, confident, so certain of themselves. Then the gift-giving began, one by one. Alvin and Lacey handed out carefully wrapped boxes, a silk scarf for my sister, a leather wallet for my brother, a sparkling necklace for my niece. The room filled with cheerful thank yous and hugs. I sat there waiting, smiling politely, my hands resting on my lap. I thought surely they hadn't forgotten me. But when the last gift was given, Alvin cleared his throat and said, "That's everyone. Everyone. Except me." The moment hung in the air like a dropped glass that hadn't shattered yet. My cheeks grew warm, but not from the fireplace. A few relatives glanced at me with awkward eyes, then looked away quickly, pretending to notice the candles or refill their glasses. I kept my smile in place, though it trembled at the edges. Inside, something sharp twisted. I had carried Alvin through the darkest years of my life after his father died. I had worked nights, skipped meals, sold the gold ring my mother left me just to put him through college. And now, at 58, I was being erased in plain sight, at Christmas, no less. I didn't speak, not yet. I simply reached for my wine glass and held it steady, knowing this silence would not last. What Alvin and Lacey had forgotten tonight, I was about to remind them in a way they would never forget. The room carried on as if nothing had happened. My sister Ruth leaned over to slice more turkey for her husband, while my niece Clara twirled the necklace Alvin had just given her. Conversation bubbled, forks clinked, and I sat with my hands folded, pretending to focus on the cranberry sauce in front of me. Inside, though, my thoughts were loud. I could feel the weight of Lacey's gaze on me for a brief moment, as though she were checking whether I would make a scene. She quickly turned back to whisper something in Alvin's ear, and he chuckled, slipping an arm around her shoulders. To anyone else, it might have looked like an innocent gesture of affection between a husband and wife. But to me, it was another reminder. My place at the table wasn't beside them anymore. I was just an extra chair they had to include. Ruth reached across to refill my wine glass. "You all right, Delane?" she asked softly, her eyes kind. "Of course," I replied with a smile that felt like porcelain. I lifted the glass, nodded, and took a sip. The wine was dry, sharp, a taste that clung to the back of my throat longer than I wanted. The chatter circled around travel plans, holiday sales, and New Year's resolutions. My brother talked about taking his boat down to Florida, and Lacey lit up, sharing her plans for a spring break trip with Alvin. Their voices overlapped like a duet, and though I tried to listen, each word was a reminder of how far they'd drifted from me. Once upon a time, Alvin and I had been each other's whole world. I tried to anchor myself in the details of the evening, hoping they would steady me. The golden skin of the turkey glistening on the platter, the soft flicker of candlelight casting shadows on the tablecloth, the faint carol playing from the old radio in the corner. The house smelled of pine needles and cinnamon, and if I closed my eyes, I could almost pretend it was one of those Christmases years ago when Alvin was still a boy, tugging at my sleeve, begging to open presents early. But when I opened them, The reality of the empty space in front of me, no gift, no acknowledgement, was impossible to ignore. Clara laughed loudly at something Alvin said, and everyone joined in. My own laugh stuck in my chest, refusing to rise. I pushed a bite of stuffing around my plate, nodding along as though I had caught the joke. But really, all I could think about was the look in Alvin's eyes when he said, "That's everyone." There hadn't been a flicker of hesitation, no sign of realization. He truly believed I didn't matter in that moment. Dinner dragged on, though I couldn't tell if it was long or short. Time felt strange, stretching and shrinking with every forced smile. At one point, Ruth leaned over again, pressing her hand against mine. "Don't let it ruin your night," she whispered, so quietly I almost doubted she'd spoken. I just squeezed her hand in return, grateful, but unable to form words. When the plates were cleared, the children dashed off toward the tree, squealing with excitement over toys and games. The adults lingered at the table, sipping coffee and brandy, talking politics and weather. I remained quiet, invisible among the noise, until I felt something change inside me. It wasn't anger exactly. It was colder, sharper, like the crack of ice on a frozen river. I decided right then that I would not walk away from this table diminished. I would not leave my son with the belief that his mother was someone he could forget without consequence. I straightened in my chair, folded my napkin neatly, and waited. The moment would come, and when it did, the silence I carried tonight would give way to something no one at this table was expecting. The longer I sat there, the more the sounds around me seemed distant, like I was underwater. The laughter, the forks scraping plates, the faint clink of ice in glasses, all of it blurred into a low hum. My eyes drifted to the tree in the living room, its lights twinkling red and green. Underneath it, piles of wrapping paper were already scattered from the children tearing into their toys. I used to love that chaos. Now it felt like a world moving on without me. I thought back to Christmases when Alvin was small, when I'd stay up until 2 a.m. wrapping gifts after a late shift at the diner. I would set his presents under the tree, careful to leave one unwrapped so he could find it at dawn and believe Santa had been there. The way his eyes used to glow, those memories had carried me through years when I wasn't sure how we'd survive. After his father's sudden passing, it was just Alvin and me against the world. I had promised myself he would never feel abandoned, never feel less than anyone else. Now, watching him sit at the head of the table beside Lacey, his laughter louder than anyone's, I wondered if he even remembered those nights. A plate of pecan pie passed down the line. I declined politely, my stomach too tight to accept anything sweet. My brother raised his eyebrows, surprised I'd turned down my favorite dessert, but he didn't press. He didn't know the storm gathering inside me. I sipped my coffee, bitter and hot, and let the taste anchor me. Every so often, Lacey glanced at me with that polite smile she had perfected, the kind that said she tolerated me more than welcomed me. She leaned in close to Alvin, brushing her hand across his arm as she whispered something that made him laugh. I caught the motion, the closeness, and the way he seemed completely absorbed by her. I couldn't begrudge him love. No. I wanted that for him, but what cut deep was the ease with which they erased me, as though his life had started only when she entered it. The children tumbled back into the dining room, clutching toys and shouting to show off their treasures. One boy nearly toppled a glass of wine as he ran past. His father caught him by the arm, laughing, while his mother scolded gently. I smiled at the scene, though it twisted the knife inside me. Families are messy, loud, imperfect, but at their core, they are meant to protect one another. Tonight, I felt like the only one left unprotected. I traced the rim of my coffee cup with one finger, steady and slow. The porcelain felt cool where the heat hadn't reached. In that simple gesture, I found clarity. This wasn't about a scarf, a necklace, or a wallet. It wasn't about the absence of a box with my name on it. It was about respect, about acknowledgement, about the bond I thought unbreakable between mother and son. And it struck me then. Perhaps silence wasn't strength anymore. Perhaps it was permission. I looked at Alvin across the table. His head was thrown back in laughter at something Ruth's husband had said. For a second, I saw the boy he used to be, chasing fireflies in the backyard, holding my hand at the county fair. Then the image faded, replaced by the man who had just announced, "That's everyone," without realizing he'd cut his mother out. I set my cup down carefully, aligning it with the saucer as though precision mattered. My heart no longer raced with anger. Instead, it beat steady with resolve. I knew what I was going to do. Not yet, not in the middle of coffee and pie. But soon, before the night ended, I would remind Alvin of who I was. Not just his mother, not just a woman sitting quietly at the table, but the builder of something he had never even imagined. And when that moment came, the weight of my silence would break, and the truth would fall heavy on everyone present. When the last of the dessert plates had been cleared, the room began to slow. The younger children were tucked away in the den with a Christmas movie playing, their laughter spilling faintly through the doorway. The adults leaned back in their chairs, sipping coffee or brandy, voices mellowed by full bellies and holiday warmth. It was the quiet after the storm of dinner, the moment when people settled into comfort. That was when I rose from my chair. The scrape of the wooden legs against the floor caught their attention. Conversations paused, heads turned. I smoothed the napkin in my hands and placed it neatly on the table before speaking. "I suppose it's my turn," I said softly, though my voice carried in the hush. "I brought something too. A gift, you could call it." Alvin tilted his head, confused. Lacey's smile faltered, as if she had expected the evening to end without me taking up any space at all. My sister Ruth watched me with wide eyes, sensing something beneath the calm surface. I walked to the sideboard where I had left my leather satchel earlier. From it, I pulled a slim folder, its edges worn from the years I had carried it back and forth to meetings and banks. I laid it flat on the table and flipped it open. The glossy pages inside reflected the candlelight, charts, numbers, photographs of storefronts with bright green awnings. "These," I said, turning the folder so the others could see, "are my stores, 12 of them now, across North and South Carolina, with 3 more opening next year." The silence deepened. My brother leaned forward, his brows knit. Lacey's hand slipped from Alvin's arm. "For more than a decade," I continued, my voice steady, "while you all saw me working long hours, I was building something, a chain of organic food markets, small at first, but growing stronger every year. This," I tapped a page showing annual revenue, "is the result." Ruth let out a low whistle. "Delane," she whispered, astonished. I looked at Alvin then. His face was pale, his mouth slightly open, as though the words wouldn't form. He had never asked what I did with my time beyond work. Perhaps he assumed I scraped by. Perhaps he never cared to know. But tonight, he knew. "And one more thing," I said, reaching back into the satchel. I held up a small velvet box, the kind that didn't hold jewelry but a single key. The gold glinted under the lights. "This was meant for you, Alvin, a condo in Charleston overlooking the water. I thought you and Lacey might like it as a retreat, a place to build memories." A ripple ran through the table. Alvin blinked, as though waking from a dream. Lacey's lips parted, her fingers twitching as if to reach for the key. I closed the box before she could move. But after tonight, I said quietly, I realized something. Respect matters more than obligation. Love matters more than appearances. And gifts. I paused, letting the weight of the words sink in, are not about the wrapping paper or the price tag. They're about seeing someone, truly seeing them. Tonight, I was invisible to you. Gasps, shifting chairs, the rustle of unease. I turned then, and instead of handing the box to my son, I placed it gently in front of Clara, my niece, whose eyes were wide and brimming with tears. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I whispered. The room froze. Clara looked from me to Alvin, then back again, trembling as she reached out to touch the box but didn't dare open it. Alvin pushed back his chair, the legs scraping harsh against the floor. "Mom, what are you doing?" His voice cracked, the first sign of panic breaking through. I met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm reminding you who I am." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Alvin's chair screeched against the hardwood as he half stood, half fell back into it. His face was flushed now. The laughter and confidence drained away. Lacey sat stiff beside him, her manicured fingers gripping the edge of the table as though holding on would anchor her in this new reality. "Mom," Alvin said again, softer this time. "I didn't mean what?" My voice was calm, though my heart pounded steady in my chest. "Didn't mean to forget me. Didn't mean to erase me." He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked down at his hands. The sight tugged at me. Those hands had once been small enough to fit inside mine, sticky with peanut butter, clinging to me as though I was the only safe thing in the world. "I thought," he faltered, running a hand through his hair. "I thought you didn't need anything from me. You've always been strong, Mom. I guess I assumed." Assumed wrong. The words cut sharper than I intended, but I didn't pull them back. Strength doesn't mean a person wants to be invisible. Alvin, it doesn't mean you can skip over them at Christmas as though they don't exist. The room was silent, but for the faint pop of the fireplace. Ruth's husband cleared his throat, then thought better of speaking. Clara still clutched the velvet box, looking frightened to even breathe. Alvin pressed his palms together, resting his forehead against them like he was praying. For a long moment, I thought he might stay there forever, lost in shame. Then he lifted his head, and his eyes met mine, wet, pleading. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, and for the first time all evening, his voice sounded like the boy I had raised, not the man who had forgotten me. It was a small thing, those words. Late, clumsy, barely audible. But it was something. I softened, but only slightly. "Apologies don't erase choices," I said. "You showed me where I stand in your life. I needed to show you where you stand in mine." Lacey shifted then, speaking for the first time. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought we'd focus on the younger ones, make Christmas more fun for them." I turned to her, my tone still even. "And what lesson do they learn when they see a grandmother forgotten? When they see respect vanish because wrinkles replace youth? Fun without respect is just cruelty wrapped in paper." Her face drained of color. She looked away. Alvin reached across the table, his hand trembling. "Please don't take it back. Mom, don't take the condo from us." I studied him, the man he had become. Successful, educated, married. Yet in this moment, he looked as fragile as the boy who used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare. My heart ached, but I knew I couldn't bend, not tonight. "The condo," I said, glancing at Clara, who sat frozen with the box. "We'll stay where it is. with someone who still looks at me and sees family. Alvin flinched. His lips moved, but no words came. I stood then, sliding the folder of financials back into my satchel, snapping it shut with finality. "This isn't punishment," I told him. "It's clarity. And sometimes clarity hurts." The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Finally. Ruth placed a hand on my shoulder, a quiet gesture of support. The others avoided eye contact, unsure of where to land their sympathy. I looked once more at my son, my only child, and said, "One day you'll understand. I pray it won't be too late." Then I sat back down, calm once more, leaving the weight of my words to settle where they would. The night wound down slowly after that. Conversation resumed in uneven waves, awkward at first, then steadying as people clung to small talk, anything to smooth over the sharp edges of what had just happened. I let them. I didn't need to fill the silence anymore. My truth was out, and it was louder than any laughter or carol in the house. Clara sat close to her mother, the velvet box still unopened in her lap. She glanced at me once, her eyes wide and uncertain, as though she didn't know whether she was allowed to keep such a gift. I gave her a small nod. Her shoulders eased, and a shy smile crept across her face. That tiny moment reminded me why I had chosen her. Children don't forget kindness. They carry it forward. Alvin avoided my gaze for the rest of the evening. At one point, I caught him looking at me, lips parted like he wanted to speak, but the words never came. Instead, he busied himself helping Ruth's husband load dishes into the sink, his shoulders hunched like a man twice his age. Lacey stayed silent, her smile gone, her face unreadable. Perhaps she was angry, or embarrassed, or both. It didn't matter. When coats were gathered and goodbyes exchanged, Alvin hugged me stiffly. His arms were there, but his warmth wasn't. I patted his back, neither rejecting nor returning the embrace, and whispered only, "Good night." Driving home through the quiet streets of Asheville, I rolled down the window. Cold December air rushed in, carrying the faint scent of pine and wood smoke. The town was glowing with holiday lights strung across porches and storefronts, but I felt no heaviness in my chest, only calm. I had carried a burden of silence for too long, and tonight, I had set it down. When I stepped into my own home, the familiar creak of the floorboards greeted me. I hung up my coat, lit a single candle on the kitchen counter, and poured myself a glass of water. My phone buzzed where I had left it. A message from Alvin lit up the screen. "I'm sorry. Mom, I don't know what else to say. Please call me." I stared at the words for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, tempted to reply, tempted to soften the ache in both our hearts. But I set the phone down instead. Not tonight. Some lessons need silence to settle. The next morning, I sat at my desk to draft the Friday newsletter for my employees. For years, I had written these notes myself, small messages of encouragement tucked into updates about schedules, sales, and expansions. They were my way of reminding every person in the company that they mattered, that they were seen. I typed slowly, carefully. The words came easier than I expected. This season reminds us that gifts are not measured in price or size, but in the act of recognition. To see someone, to honor their presence, is the greatest gift we can give. Never underestimate the quiet strength of those who stand beside you, even in silence. Inside that silence, there may be an empire. I signed my name, leaned back in the chair, and let the morning light spill through the window. Outside, children's laughter drifted faintly from the street, mingling with the sound of church bells ringing in the distance. For the first time in many years, I felt lighter. Not because I had taken something away from my son, but because I had reclaimed something for myself: dignity, presence, and a voice that would not be silenced again. Christmas had ended not with a bow or wrapping paper, but with clarity. And clarity, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.